to another edition of Broad Mind, where we explore the minds of writers, authors, and beyond. I'm your host, T.L. Rotkiewicz. Today's guest is Mark Dressler, who is a retired business owner who began writing mystery suspense novels in 2014. He is an active member of Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime. Partial proceeds from his books will be donated to the Boston Children's Hospital. Mark is the author of Dead and Gone, a Detective Dan Shields mystery. And I welcome one and the same, Mark. Hello.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you very much for having me here. Very happy to talk about my book, and whatever you want to know, go ahead and shoot.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on making the Right Stuff list in the Hartford Courant. That's with Carol Goldberg, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, Carol's a good contact, and I'm very happy that she's been promoting me and putting my stuff in the Courant. There will be more things coming in the Courant, and we can talk about those a little bit later.
Okay. Now, I understand that you started writing in 2014, but when did you know you wanted to become a writer?
Can we go back a little way?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll get into that. But I am from Hartford. My wife, Patricia, and I live in Windsor. We've been here for about 13 years. But I grew up in Hartford in the North End, and I graduated Weaver in 1964. And I had a career in corporate for about 25 years. I was with various insurance companies and different levels of middle management. And after the corporate world, I had another business. Okay, I had a business in East Windsor, and it was at Sophia's Plaza called Rembrandt's Professional Picture Framing. So I had a corporate career, a business career. And about 7 years ago, I retired, and my wife retired too. And in retirement, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And about 4 years ago, I somehow started writing. And what really got me into it is that one of my daughters had a house, a piece of property that was on 7 acres of land. The house was far back from the road. You wouldn't know anybody lived there. There was a mailbox in the front and a dirt driveway. And 7 acres of land, 5 of which were forest-like. And I'd go up there invariably, and I'd say, boy, you could find a dead body out there. No one would know. So about 4 years ago, I somehow sat down at my computer, and I started writing. And I had 3, 4, maybe 5 pages of something that started with a dead body. And I just let it sit, and I went back to it. And as I started writing, the magic of writing started to occur. Because when you write, you start creating characters.
Yep.
Okay? And you've probably heard this from other authors. And every author that I talk to, it's a common thing. So I started creating characters. And sure enough, they started talking to each other, okay?
Yep.
And once they talk to each other, they start taking on a life of their own. They really breathe. And you find out that you become an actor too, because all your characters, there's a part of you in all your characters.
Yes.
There might be 100
Yes.
characters, and you're you're an actor. And somehow the characters begin to drive the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's part of the magic. So I just continued writing, and it took quite some time. And somehow I wound up with about 300 pages of a story.
Wow.
And that's your typical first draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I've kind of written a little bit like mystery stuff. Actually, it was fan fiction. I tried to stay in the boundaries of the storylines because they're already created by different creators, like the TV stuff and whatnot. But I'm wondering, there's like mystery, and then there's really good mystery. I'm wondering, what does it take to actually write a really good, compelling mystery?
It's a good question. Okay. I'm happy to say that I do belong to the Mystery Writers of America, Extras in Crime, and I talk with several other authors. We have meetings, conferences, and so I know when I'm writing and what I'm writing that it fits with the genre. And basically, to my mind, what makes a good mystery is characters, okay, interesting characters. You have to have an interesting story,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Dialogue is critical,
yeah,
but the key to a good mystery is the seeds, okay? And when you're writing a mystery, you're planting seeds here and there. And those seeds give you some clues along the way, but they're hidden.
yeah,
And the other key to a good mystery is kind of pulling the rug out at the end
yeah,
and really
Yeah.
surprising everybody.
yeah,
And that's what I do in this book. And the writing process, you know, like I referred to before, is the first draft. And I've met some really great authors this summer, John Grisham being one,
wow,
and Michael Connelly, my kind of idol. I'll tell you about my character in a minute. But they echo the same things. And writing a mystery is really a challenge, but it's very rewarding.
wow. You know, like we were talking about the good mysteries and wanting to become a writer and everything, and I'm thinking to myself, I think the one thing that a lot of people don't realize when you write fiction is that you need to have conflict. Conflict, conflict, conflict. It's either with themselves, with another character or something. I had a previous guest on, and we were talking about how he really gets keyed up and gets into his characters and everything. Like you said, it is about characters, because I've written novels too, but mine's more music-related fiction, but still, it's the characters that drive the story. And there's always something that, like I say, puts a little, putting like a pen to a bicycle wheel and just stopping it, and then having to redo or take back the person to another part of the story before then, and then have you realize that you have to go back again, you know? So it's like, wow, I didn't see that coming. So
Well,
it's
part of the
interesting.
writing process, people write different ways, okay?
Yeah,
And I know a lot of people take notes. And if you ask 5 different authors how they write, you're going to get 5 different answers. There are those authors that write notes, detailed outlines. They write chapters out of sequence.
Yeah.
They go back and
yeah. B,
fill
C,
them
A.
in.
Yeah,
And I'm not like that. There are kind of 2 schools of authors, people who are note takers and such, and I'm what's affectionately known as a pantser, P-A-N-T-S-E-R. And it's a real term that we use. I write by the seat of my pants, okay? And another thing, a lot of times we'll hear at conferences, people ask, do you know the beginning? Do you know the end? Do you know the middle? Some people do. Most authors don't really know the end.
right.
I did not know the end. And it's interesting because when I thought I knew the end, I got up in the middle of the night and I had this, what I call an aha moment.
Yeah,
And I said, wow, if I do this, and it kind of changes some things in the book and you have to go back and,
Yeah.
and rewrite.
yeah,
But what I came up with is an ending that really is a big surprise.
yeah.
And none of my readers have guessed it yet.
Wow. Do you have like a method to your madness? Do you, you get inside your characters and really pull something out? Like when you're feeling a certain emotion, and then say, I gotta go with this.
No, my characters kind of drive my thoughts and my emotions, and when they're moving, and when something is going on, when I know my character, I'll talk about my characters too. Dan Shield is a Hartford detective. He's a family man, and he's a rogue detective. Okay, he doesn't always play by the rules.
Yeah, that's why we like him.
So, and there's something to, I guess I stretched the envelope a little bit with him. Okay, so he starts out investigating a crime, and he gets close to being suspended. Okay, and he gets onto another crime. And the story slowly weaves two crimes, into one big mystery. And along the way, not only does Dan come close to losing his job, but most of the time is all detectives and mysteries. They come face to face with danger.
Yeah.
And that's another element in a good mystery. Your protagonist, when he's faced with danger, what happens? How does he cope with it? And of course, you can't kill off your hero,
No,
so you know
no.
something good's going to happen. But you try to make it exciting.
Yeah. Were you ever influenced by like the detective shows, the PI shows? I'm going to go way back, about 30 years, and say something like Magnum PI or your Spencer for Hire, that type of, those mystery type of, Columbo.
Oh, I've seen all those shows, Kojak. I still watch
yeah.
Columbo. Columbo
Oh, yes.
is one of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely.
From a detective perspective, John Grisham is one of my favorite authors, but Michael Connelly, who I also met this summer, his character, his detective is Harry Bosch. And most people who read mysteries know that name. And Michael Connelly's probably the only writer that I kind of faithfully read. And my character, Dan Shields, is sort of based on Harry Bosch. Dan might be a little bit rougher around the edges. I'm not quite sure. But I'm happy to say that people have commented to me that my character, Dan, reminds them of Harry Bosch. So that to me is about the biggest compliment I could get at this point.
Interesting. Do you have to like do your own research for a mystery like this? Like there's another author, I don't want to butcher his name, but Jerry Laburiella or something. He worked with the medical examiner, I think it was. I can't remember his name, but that's how he got into writing his story, or that's what he got it from, or whatever. But did you have to do that? You have to get it from real people, your characters?
Yeah. Well, there's certainly research that goes on.
Doing homework.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'll interesting comment about homework in a minute. But yeah, fiction is fiction, but fiction is also factual. You kind of need to get things right.
Yeah.
And I have an instance that I refer to when I give my talks. There's a medical procedure in here that happens. And, I wrote it, and I was fat, dumb, and happy. And I had it all wrong. When I talked to a real medical person going through that same procedure, I said, wow. So now it's correct.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you do have to kind of go through all of that.
Now that you've done your first book, do you think Dan Shield is going to be a series? Series of stories.
It is.
It is.
Now, I have 3 other books, or manuscripts at this point. And I had hoped that my next release was going to be a female detective, New York City. That manuscript is kind of ready for my editor, but what's happened, and I did plan to write another Dan Shields mystery down the road, what's happened is the people who are reading my book are all asking me to write another Dan Shields book. So now, faced with playing to my audience. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I am at this point about 2/3 of the way through a second Dan Shields mystery. Wow. Yeah.
I noticed that you, well, how do I want to say this? That you're an independent author. Why did you choose to go the small press route as opposed to traditional?
Okay. Let me get back to the basics of writing, and then I'll answer that too. Whether you go the small route, independent route, or the traditional route, it's critical that you follow the same steps. And what I mean by that is it takes a lot of editing, rewriting, editing, and editing. And at some point, the reality is nobody can write a book by themselves. So at some point you realize you've got to hire professional editors, okay? And there are different types of professional editors. Copy editors are terrific, and you have to have them. And they're the last editor. They go through the grammar, the punctuation. But in a book like mine, I really need a developmental editor. And they're very important. And they make sure that the story moves along. They make sure your characters are interesting, okay? And nobody rewrites the book for you, but they have suggestions.
Yeah.
And you take their suggestions and you get your book to a point where it's polished. And when I say polished, it's interesting, and I'll cite, kind of paraphrasing John Grisham, who I met this summer. After the book has been edited so many times and you've read it so many times, you begin to hate it. That's when you know it's ready for publication. I know what he means. You don't really hate the book. Now, the traditional route, I did start out with that. I have a mentor named Allison Brennan, very big-time mystery writer, lives in California, and she helped me write query letters, killer query letters. So you have to become skilled in query writing, synopsis writing, and you have to target the right agents. And even doing that, not only she told me, other authors, you have to let your ego aside and gear up for rejection after rejection, and that's fine. And you understand that and you do that. Many of the people that belong to Mystery Writers of America are in the same positions as I am. A little bit older, starting out as writers. It's not really meant to be a career that's going to support your retirement.
Right.
Okay? I'm calling it a glorified hobby.
Yeah.
But you do owe it to yourself. I think every author owes it to themselves to try the traditional route. And the reality is that it's like winning the lottery.
Yeah.
So, in talking with a few other authors my age who have gone the self-publishing route, I said, you know, I think I'd like to do that. And that way I'll have a book published when I'm in my lower 70s versus being a lot older, okay? And it gives me more time to devote to other books. I have no deadlines. And I'm very happy that I went the route I went. And you do have to, like I said, follow the same steps. You have to have that polished product, and you have to have a good cover designer.
Yeah. As a writer, would you say that you have to be like college taught or anything like that, or it's just inside you to be a writer? You know, like you don't need a master's degree to do something like that.
Well, you don't need a master's degree, and the reality is this. I was never really a writer. I did okay in English in school, okay, and I speak fairly well. When it comes to writing, it's an entirely different game.
Yeah.
And what I've learned along the way, and I'm still in a very educational type of process where I'm still learning every day.
Yeah.
And writing is a different animal than just speaking. You learn that there are punctuation marks you've never even heard of in school, ellipses, em dashes, n dashes. You learn things like point of view. You have to write one person's point of view. And you have to really learn how to be a master at eliminating dangling participles. And a lot of, I do this when I give my book talks too. I talk about the writing process, and it's easy to say, dog bit the cat and it died, okay? And speaking it, you kind of know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But writing it, that's terribly wrong,
Yeah.
okay?
Fragmented,
Yeah, well,
kind of.
who died, the cat or the dog?
Yeah.
But those are easy things to sneak into books and overlook.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be an expert at trying to find those and write it the right way.
For myself, I had to do a lot of homework because I was choosing a time period that I wasn't really part of, or I was too young. So I think it's more of a learning process, like you said, all the time. It's not about master's degrees or anything, but it's just constantly you're learning about that subject matter. You know, like I have a third novel that I'm going to be working on, and it's going to take me totally somewhere else. And I have to learn about all the things that go into that, too. So it's tough. Plus you have anachronisms, you know, the time thing. You have to make sure everything's right, like you were saying about medical examiners, that if you don't get it right, someone's going to point it out to you.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it makes it interesting.
The other thing about writing, I'll just throw this in. I was at a seminar with Jeffrey Deaver, and he made the comment, and it's true. Once you become a writer, it's like having homework every day for the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But you get really useful things. You get useful information out of it, you know.
Yeah.
If you're not into it, then it's hard to, because writing is a passion, first and foremost. That's the thing. Getting into that, can you explain why you're involved with book clubs, and what do they do for you as an author?
Well, book clubs are very important. And part of the writing process not only involves book clubs, beta readers, okay, because you do need feedback. Even when a book is in its rough shape, you do need some feedback. And the feedback shouldn't come from relatives or people who are afraid to tell you or
Biased,
hit between you,
a little
between
biased,
the
yeah.
eyes. Yeah. Book clubs will do that for you, okay? Readers clubs, readers groups, and there's writers groups too. So I think it all is very important if you're serious about writing to be involved.
I noticed, like on your page, that you go like to restaurants or whatever. Do you get good feedback from something like that?
Well, I eat at restaurants.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't. I haven't really promoted myself at restaurants. Yeah, but it's interesting that I've sort of become a promoter. I mean, I've been to eyeglass places. I've been to lighting stores where somehow my book has come up in discussion,
yeah.
and I've been able to sell a few books.
Nice.
So, interesting.
Because not only do you have to be an author, but you also have to be a marketer of your own stories, too.
Yes, and that is one of the big differences between the traditional publishing and the independent. Because when you're an independent, you do have to promote yourself.
Yeah.
You do have to be active on social media. I've had several book signings so far. I've got 8 or 10 more lined up from now, from between now and April. So we'll keep the train moving, and those are the things you need to do.
Yeah. Interesting. We used to have open mic night in the center of town, actually, and I used to do like some little bit of reading to people, and they were like, "Oh wow, I like that." It's like, how do you know how much you should read in front of an audience? I think that's...
Some of the get-togethers that we have with mystery writers, we do have readings. We are invited to read, asked to read, volunteer to read. And what they do is they try to limit you to 5 minutes. So you really have to pick out a chapter, a piece of a chapter, and try to pick out something interesting and see what you can read in 5 minutes. And you do get instant feedback.
Oh, interesting. I got to ask you, what's next for you?
Well, next is Dan Shields' second book. I have a working title, and Dead and Gone, that was not actually my working title. That came later. And I think it's fairly common that people come up with working titles and then change the title toward the end. So I'm not quite ready to give out the title of the second book, but it is another Dan Shields mystery. I'm hopeful that, knowing what I know now, this book was really at least 3 to 3.5 years in the making.
Yeah.
Because I was raw at everything.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. And what I know now, realistically, I'm probably looking at June or July for the next release.
Nice. Do you have any appearances coming up?
I've got several. My list is in the car, but I will tell you that the next big one is February 1st. It's a Thursday night, and it's at Barnes & Noble, downtown Hartford, which is the Yukon bookstore. And anybody not familiar with the new downtown Hartford, it's in the Front Street area, the redevelopment area. So that'll be from 6 to 8 p.m. There'll be snacks, and it should be a great time.
Okay. Where can people get your book?
The book is available on Amazon. You can get it in the paperback copy, or you can get it on Kindle. It's also available at Barnes & Noble. If you go there online or into the stores, they can order it for you. It's available, and it's on the shelf at Bank Street Books and Mystic.
Absolutely wonderful place.
I'm working with R.J. Julia, and you can get it at one of my book signings. And I do have several other book signings coming up after that. I have, now I don't have the dates in front of me, but I do have a couple of others in February. There's Manchester, and then there's Enfield coming up. So there are places to get the book, and I'd be happy to, delighted to meet anybody who wants to attend.
Oh, okay. I want to thank you, Mark, for being on the show. You've been a delightful guest.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. This has been Broad Mind. I am T.L. Rotkiewicz. Until then.